everyone. Welcome back to the M8 stage. Now we're going to have an exciting panel discussion with 4 members here on stage in Stockholm and Ioan-Dragoș Tudorache joining us virtually. Very happy to be able to give a good time for this dialogue. We'll have 50 minutes that will feel like 5 going forward. The topic of discussion is understanding the European Artificial Intelligence Act and how it impacts data and AI innovation of our efforts across industry and sectors. And I think that's where the discussion will lie, where the regulation will meet the opportunities and circumstances for enterprises to still innovate, to still be able to drive the development of data practices and use AI at scale. We have a lot of questions and we have many honored panelists here virtually. So I will start off with introducing them and then we'll hit it off with the questions at hand. Virtually with us, we have Ioan-Dragoș Tudorache. He's a member of the European Parliament and Vice President of the Renew Europe Group. He's the Libre Rapporteur of the EU AI Act and sits on the Committee of Foreign Affairs, a Committee of Civil Liberties, Justice, Home Affairs, and the Committee of Inquiry to investigate the use of Pegasus and equivalent surveillance spyware. The Subcommittee of Security and Defense and the European Parliament Delegation for Relations with the United States. He was the chair of the Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in the Digital Age. With us here on stage, we have Anne Bøgh Fangel, the User Experience Manager at Omilon, leading work with the user involvement, human-centric innovation. She has a background within tech innovation, consultancy, and more than 20 years experience bringing people change and organization and transformation into play. We have Cristina Andersson, strategist of AI Robotics at Develor Productions, and worked with artificial intelligence and robotics since 2011. She has been an expert for different EU and national organizations, as well as several companies, mentioning, for instance, the steering group of the Finnish National AI 4.0 strategy. We have Carolina Brånby, lawyer and director of digital policy at the Confederation of Swedish Enterprises since 2015, with focus on EU law related to the use of data, AI, and data protection. And last but not least is Alex Moltzau, senior policy advisor at NORA, has led the coordinating work on policy and ethics for the large national research collaboration in NORA for the past 5 years, and we've seen as a very vocal voice in terms of EU policy also. Having that said, I would want us to dive deep into the topic already from the start, and I'll start off with having Ioan-Dragoș Tudorache answering the question of what are the main objectives of the EU AI Act and how does it seek to balance innovation and the use of AI while ethical considerations and public safety to have that in mind. So let's see now if technology works and if we can hear you, Ioan-Dragoș.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone. I do hope that you can see and hear me, and I'm really sorry that I cannot be with you in Stockholm. Stockholm has a very special place in my heart because I studied there. But we are in a plenary week, the last plenary week of this mandate, so I had to be in Strasbourg. In fact, you mentioned in your own question the twin objectives, and I like to, and I insist to call them the twin objectives of the AI Act, because we have, from the very start, approached our work in preparing, negotiating, and then finally adopting this piece of legislation with these 2 objectives, from my point of view, at the same level. On one hand, providing the right protection for our societies and for our citizens when they interact with this otherwise amazing technology, but which we know by now already does raise risks that need to be mitigated, and that's what, again, one objective of the regulation is. But at the same time, to make sure that because you recognize this enormous potential and benefits that the technology has, to make sure that this regulation also puts in place the right framework, the right levers, the right enablers in place to make sure that innovation stays in Europe, that innovation continues to grow in Europe, and that we make sure that our economies of the future will be not only open to artificial intelligence, not only be willing to uptake AI, but understand that potential and really explore it to the max. So throughout the negotiations, throughout the work that we've done, we've tried to always keep these two objectives in balance. And I am, of course, subjective when it comes to the outcome, having been so much part of it. But I do believe that we managed to find that balance in the way we have structured the text, in the way we have provided for exceptions, whenever exceptions we thought were deemed necessary, like, for example, for research and development, in the way we dealt with SMEs, which is the backbone of our economy. We all know 98% of the European market is made up of SMEs. So we recognize from the very beginning that we need to put the tools in place for SMEs to remain, access, and continue to grow in this market, to be interested to stay in Europe and grow ideas and develop them into good, healthy businesses. And for that, we've given free access to sandboxes, for example, an instrument that we have wanted to be a place where SMEs find it comfortable to be in, to interact with regulators, to test and validate their assumptions, and therefore, again, put on the market products that are safe and trustworthy. Because I believe it's ultimately also what companies out there want. They want to know that they have a standard to aspire to work against, rather than be in a competition or in a race towards the bottom. So again, we can go and delve further into details, further into discussion, but these were the two twin objectives that I said that we've worked to achieve with this text, and I think that the balance is there.
Thank you, Dragoș. Very appreciated. And we'll start off with the people in the room here. We can start off with Alex and then move away here. What do you see as the balance between of the innovation while seeing that it has ethical considerations and public safety in mind? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So I mean, it's important to say that there's like this global move towards like AI safety, right? So NIST in the US has created this AI Safety Institute, and we have the UK AI Safety Institute, and then like now this product legislation, you know, because the AI Act is supposed to make sure that we have a safe market in Europe, right? And you can think about when you drive, you know, in traffic, right? And we think about seat belts, we think about car safety, we think about the road. So there's like a great range of different aspects, you know, that we want to ensure work well, right? Because we want these things to work well for us, you know? Because it doesn't only depend on you if you drive well on the road. If there's somebody else who hasn't taken the driving license, you know, and they just crash into you, you know, it affects you. So in a sense, like to make sure that your business can run well and operate in a safe environment, they want to create a safe environment for AI in Europe. That's my impression, you know? But to do that, we have to coordinate this nationally, right? So we have this layer of competent authorities in different nations in Europe. And then you have the notified bodies who will kind of work to coordinate the standards. And then you have you, wonderful companies doing amazing things, and then trying to see kind of how do we fit into this framework to make sure that the compliance costs are manageable but not too high, right? And that's kind of like where we lie. We want a safe market, but kind of how we get there is a navigation process, because this is like one of the first pieces, large pieces of legislation for artificial intelligence in the world. You know, this is breaking work. You know, it's like, but we have to make sure that it's a breakthrough moment for AI in Europe as well. You know, and that's what we really have to work on together.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
Carolina?
So, so many things to to pick here, but most of all for us, I think from the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise, we've seen that this regulation is most of all a product safety regulation. There are very good aims, of course, and objectives to both securing innovation and ethical considerations, as you said in the question. But at the same time, it's problematic. But maybe the best thing that have been done to balance and to have some space for innovation is actually that R&D is out of the scope. So the innovation part, as long as you don't put it into services, it's out of the scope. And I think that is that was crucial for our member companies, that we got that in, or actually got it from the scope. But at the same time, of course, as you going to start to use your AI solution, then you have all the other regulations. So it's not that easy to make a balance. And I guess we can compare it with the GDPR. It's always a balance of interests. But at least one very good thing is that now we do have the AI Act, and now we have some kind of legal certainty in this area. And for now, that is what we've been waiting for, and we really appreciate that it's over, that it's done.
Thank you, Carolina.
Yes, I share your concerns totally, and I'm thinking half of the European or EU GDP comes from SMEs, like Mr. Tudorache said, and there is this risk that this could a little bit slow down the SMEs and the innovation, because AI Act is not the only one that touches these SMEs. So there is also the Data Act, there is Machine Act, there is the CRA is coming, the Cyber Resilience Act that really has to do with EU AI Act. And all this, and when you think that you are the managing director of an SME and you have done your work during the day, and then in the evening you try to take care of the economics and bookkeepings, and then look into all these regulations, and you are like, no, take me away from here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, well, from a company perspective, I think I'm sort of the company perspective in this, in some sense. I think we've been talking a lot about compliance. We've been talking a lot about what is this really all about, and I think that when I talk to people, it seems that we are sometimes losing sight of why we are actually doing that. I'm a user experience manager, so I think the whole idea of thinking AI as a tool for people is really, really central. And I think that it's important that we continue to keep in mind that yes, compliance, yes, rules, but this is also to do with good craftsmanship. It's also to do with wanting to actually succeed in implementing solutions of high quality in organizations. So from my point of view, the regulations and the focus on human centricity is really a matter of building sort of good quality AI solutions.
Great, thank you. And I think that kind of comes back to the point that it's about bringing it in very early in the design phase. Alex.
I just want to comment briefly, because we didn't say it, but like this is a kind of high-risk framework in a sense. Like it has different tires, so it doesn't mean that necessarily everything that everyone in this hall do has to be kind of really brutally touched by everything in the AI Act. So think about kind of what are you doing? Is there a risk related to that? You know, and in other industries, and probably if anyone here is working in health, you know, there are already stringent requirements on that, right? So it's necessarily kind of like it doesn't necessarily break the bank for people that are operating in already kind of risky spaces. So if you are used to doing risk assessment, technical specifications, this is not going to blow your mind, you know. This is just creating a safe framework, you know.
Great, thank you, Alex. So I want to double-click and go further down the rabbit hole of startups and SMEs. The majority of the organizations and companies we have across Europe, and those operating in Europe. And I would want us to get as tangible as possible. We've talked about two things so far. We have talked about the exclusion of research and development. We've talked, Dragoș, you mentioned also sandboxes. But having, like, let's imagine that we have every one of these small and medium startups sitting across the table for us. what would be your strongest recommendation at this stage to do in order to support the process of gearing up towards meeting the new normal of having governed AI? And we'll start off with you, Dragoș.
Well, I think the first and fundamental question that anyone sitting either in the room or sitting out there in the economy of the EU and wondering, is this act relevant for me or not? Is it going to ask me to do things or not? I think the one thing to mention, I think Alex mentioned it also, and few of the other speakers, is the fact that the AI Act is not meant to touch all of the AI out there. In fact, whether you trust the Commission's impact assessments or not, which say that somewhere between 80 and 85% of AI out there, in fact, will not be covered by the AI Act. But even if you don't trust that figure in itself, a lot of the AI, in fact, is literally not covered by the AI Act. AI that is going to be used in optimizing all sorts of business processes, manufacturing, transport, factories. A lot of that is simply not covered by the AI Act. Not to mention, again, someone also referred to the R&D exemption as well. So the first question to ask, if you're an SME or a company wondering whether this is something that has to worry you or not, is, am I in fact in any of the risk categories of this regulation? If you're not developing AI in the area of recruitment, of health, of banking, of insurance for life and health insurance, and 2 or 3 other categories, migration management, border management, in other words, AI that is directly interacting with individuals, making recommendations, decisions, things that are, again, coming in direct, let's say, intersection with the rights of individuals, then, again, you're completely out of scope of the regulation, and you continue to develop and uptake and put on the market AI as you see fit. And if you are finding yourself in one of those categories of risk, then the next question, and you have 2 years to go through that process, the next question is it something that actually induces the kind of significant risk that is being identified by the regulation as relevant to enter into the risk framework or not? And let's say that you're a small company, you're a startup, and you can't afford, you don't know, well, because, by the way, we're working with self-assessment, so you don't have to look for third-party assessment. But in your process of self-assessment, you're not sure. Right? You look at the specifications, you look at the standards. I underline that, very important. There will be standards sitting underneath this act, which GDPR, by the way, someone made a comparison with GDPR. Yes, it is comparable with the GDPR because it has this horizontal comprehensive effect in the market. But on the other hand, the one thing that was not right from my point of view with GDPR was that it remained only the letter of the law. And for any engineer out there trying to figure out whether and how GDPR was impacting them, you had to basically go and talk to a lawyer. What we're trying to do with the AI Act is to also simplify that process, to reduce that cost of compliance by having guidelines, by having technical standards, so that, again, when a company would be doing their self-assessment to figure out, so they know, okay, I'm doing AI in the area of recruitment, let's say. But I don't know, I'm doing AI that optimizes vacancy notices. Am I really inducing a significant risk to the individuals that will be part of recruitment processes using my application or not? Because, in fact, I'm not using the actual CVs or the personal data of individuals. I'm only optimizing vacancy notices. Or not. I am actually also doing something that takes on data from the applicants, let's say, and uses it in order to produce a recommendation. So if you're uncertain as to where you are there, in that self-assessment, and after looking also at the technical standards, which is also an enabler to make you understand how compliance would go, you again have that option, free of charge, to go to a sandbox where you have a priority access as an SME, things that we have deliberately put in as mandatory obligations for the national authorities to ensure, so that there, again, you go through the process of checking, verifying, validating, testing, and at the end of the day, you know exactly where you are, what you have to do before you go on the market. So we've created a framework where we've tried to make it as simple. I'm realistic. I know that it's having to do anything is still more than having to do nothing. So yes, there will be an extra layer of complexity for anyone that would be finding themselves developing applications, putting them on the market in any of the risk categories. But we've tried, I'll repeat myself, but we've tried to lower that cost of compliance, to simplify that compliance as much as possible.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dragoș. I'll hand it over for you, Alex, and then we'll start the route. Complementing on building on what the Dragoș have mentioned, and I think we can do so because there is a lot of commonality of the thoughts. What more would you say to an SME or startup? What could they do, and how should they approach it already today?
Yeah, so I mean, the thing is like, I think the Commission has been working on this as well, because I can see it like, you know, when it came out like in April 2021 to today, you know, they got a lot of feedback because there's been like a lot of rounds. And they kind of have put it upon themselves as well to create sort of like templates, you know, so keep an eye out for that. You know, because that's really interesting in the AI Act that they have said, you know, we will make sure that the compliance burden is not as great on SMEs as it is on like the large industrial actors, right? But they have also kind of created these general purpose AI requirements, you know. I think that has not been mentioned as extensively yet, but when kind of like ChatGPT and everything like that happened, they also kind of put these added requirements. So maybe that's also something to consider, like will you fall within this general purpose AI, and it might not be the case for a lot of people in the room, I think. But so what can a SME do? You know, just make sure that you document your work and you keep logs. Like, I mean, this might sound like really basic, but it says like keep logs for 6 months. You know. Okay, that's something that it says. You know, there are like a few kind of tidbits and details that might be kind of nice to kind of note if you fall within the categories of how you're going to kind of that you need to document things. You know, and that you need to do some risk assessments, and just how are you going to manage AI in your organization. And a lot more people will think about that in the time ahead, because it's been a bit like the Wild West, you know, and everybody's just like, oh, my AI came out, you know, like to all the children, and like, no, this is interesting, you know. Is this something we thought about, you know, like all your kids, you know, just like chatting to a chatbot about like their life, you know, so I mean, like we want this, you know, but how are we going to do it? I think these are like, don't think that it's too complicated. You know, we can do this.
Thanks, Alex. Reassuring at least. Carolina, what more?
For startups, I think it's a quite good, or at least better situations than for the companies that are already established. I mean, when I meet startups and newly started companies, they often say that if they have been ongoing for a few years, it's like, oh, why didn't I know about the AI Act when I first started off? But if you are startups nowadays, I mean, now you know the situation, you know what's in the Act. It's possible for you to go ahead with your business thinking with the point from the actually AI Act. So I think that's a better situation, actually. But for startups, and smaller companies, what I think that it's crucial that you must like be aware of is that nowadays maybe you all know that it's getting harder and harder pressure on all bigger companies to have that they can do due diligence for the whole value chain. And if you're a startup or a smaller company, maybe you will be an undertaking to a bigger company. And this is something that forces you to be very good at knowing your AI Act and if you're included in the high-risk areas or not, and or the laws that point you out as a high-risk AI use. So, but I think it's possible, and it's good recommendations, and maybe you have other recommendations for the small ones?
I don't know, but I can try. Yeah, so for SMEs and for startups, so my advice is that be aware of these all regulations, but innovate, 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 do your business, focus on your business, focus on developing your product, and, you know, make good business. That is the most important thing. And when you have these hesitations, that is this compliant? So we have these free sandboxes where we can try, but we cannot do so that we go with regulation first. We must go business and innovation first, and then look if it needs to comply with something. But if we start to look it through regulation glasses, we are not going to innovate anything. And then the other thing is that be aware about the changes, because AI, it can be tomorrow something else what it is today. And this happened. I was a part of our national AI 4.0 program by our minister then. And our work was done in October 22, and we wrote the report. And there was no ChatGPT then. And then we published the report February 23. And there was not a word about ChatGPT or LLMs. And March 23, it was like boom with this Gen AI. So something can happen. But what I understand that this EU AI Act, it also can be flexible, so that MEPs, they can make changes quickly. Even now, when I talk to you SMEs here, and I say 6 months, you are going, 6 months, come on, that's a long time in a business. But that's maybe the minimum what the Parliament requires to make those changes. But this is the possibility, and I believe that the Parliament is awake with this, that there is good public servants like Alex who can talk to the members of the Parliament that this is now going on, please react, do something.
Thank you, Cristina.
Yeah,
Anne?
I think that one of the things that I would advise would be to take some of the AI terminology, and try and discuss internally in the organization what do we mean when we talk about transparency? What is bias? What is robustness? Because it gets very abstract, and it gets to be something that's sort of a bit far from the actual development of technologies, but to actually try and tackle some of those sort of terms and say how does this affect the way we develop our technologies? So, and what, from a human-centric perspective, what does it actually mean for us to be human-centric? I often see sort of use cases reduced to something a bit abstract. So actually take up some of these ideas and tackle them internally instead of sort of keeping them at arm's length.
Thank you, Annie. A comment from Alex?
Yeah, so I mean, like, this mightn't sound like the most exciting thing ever, but like, standards people, do you love standards? Like,
Of course
I don't think I've talked to startups that are like, I love standards. I love standards work, But like, they are developing AI standards now, and your input is actually extremely important in that process, because these AI Act as well will also be based on these standards, right? So get involved in standards, Get involved in AI standards. Does that sound exciting? Do you want to raise your hand if who's going to get involved in AI standards? Yeah. Is there any hands? I see one hand. Like, that's just amazing. One hand out of everyone. I'm not sure.
I'll talk with you, Cecilia, later on.
You want to talk to someone?
Thank you so much. Caroline?
A quick comment. If you're interested to go into a sandbox in Sweden right now, I know that IMI, our Data Protection Authority, have like 1 or 2 slots left if you want to be in a sandbox, if you're not sure about how to be compliant with both the AI Act and GDPR. So maybe that could be something. And also I would like to stress that even though we very much appreciate the possibility for the regulatory sandboxes, one must remember that it's very limited access to those. We will not have authorities with the knowledge and the possibility to have sandboxes for all SMEs and startups that would like to. So it's very limited, just a boring reminder.
Yeah, and I would say that what becomes even more critically important is how can the learnings happening in sandboxes, independent on which of the 27 countries it is, to be shared, to become a common knowledge, because it's in the end the learnings coming out of where technology, business, and the frameworks of legislation and standards comes into play, and how we can learn from that. And as we've talked about, it's a lot about okay, how can we do things by design? How can we design processes, how we apply and use data and technology in a way that it makes it easy also in the long term? And having, maybe coming back to the pure fact that it's about delivering and serving humans while we're using technology. Time flies. I want to be able to capture one more question before we round off for the day. And here I want us to kind of take one step back and look upon the more global picture. Because what the EU AI Act brings with us is one of the first of its kind of its regulation on AI that is coming into reality. And on that question, and we'll start off with you, Dragoș, is that kind of your point of view on how it will influence the competitiveness of European companies doing homegrown AI in the European Union compared to other global actors like China or US or elsewhere. Where is the benefit from a competitive point of view, and where are the potential risks from a competitive point of view?
Yes, I'll address the question, and then unfortunately I'll have to dash off because we have a voting session starting in about 15 minutes. And maybe I'll go back, if you allow me 30 seconds, on the issue of the sandboxes that was raised earlier, because I think it's quite important, linking to the use of knowledge and what do we do with all of that wealth of feedback that sandboxes are going to produce. Because that interaction between the regulator and the SMEs is going to, again, produce all sorts of information, knowledge, expertise, experiences that are very valuable, and they need to be put together and then shared and then used for the benefit of everyone. And we have, of course, thought of that. And it's one of the competences and the responsibilities of the European level governance of the EU AI office, the future office, which will need to bring in. So the sandboxes, regulatory sandboxes, will have to report this feedback to the AI office, which will then develop tools to make sure that it is shared across member states, because that will be very valuable in rolling further the implementation of the Act. Now, in terms of global competitiveness, 2 points to make here. First, having standards, having predictability, having certainty is, from my point of view, an advantage for doing business. And I can tell you from interacting with investment funds, with governments, with all sorts of AI ecosystems around the world, everyone is now looking very seriously at coming to the EU, because they realize that this is where it's going to grow out. All the work to develop a framework for trustworthy AI, from benchmarks to evaluation tools to standards, all of that is now bubbling and is going to bubble further in the coming months and years out of Europe, because this is where the framework is being put in place, and then is going to spill over beyond the borders of the Union. I'm convinced of that. There is also it's a level playing field. It doesn't matter whether you're a Chinese company or American company or European company. If you want to be on this market, if you want to put on the market your applications, you will have to respect the rules the same as everyone else. And then further, if you have developed something that is fit for the standards and the benchmarks and the trustworthy framework that is fit for purpose under the AI Act, that is a calling card for putting then your product on other markets with that safety mark, which is going to be so important. I'm convinced of that in other jurisdictions as well. And here I want to make the second point, which is, yes, we are the first, but we're certainly not going to be the last. I can tell you again, from all of these interactions with policymakers around the world, that what we have done is now being watched very carefully. It serves as an inspiration for many parliaments around the world, from Latin America to Asia, who are now considering regulation themselves. Because this is something that we have to understand, I think, even more than it was with privacy and GDPR. AI is the same everywhere. AI is raising the same concerns, questions, and the risks are similar across the land. So societies are pushing up, demanding a response from the policymakers. So I'm convinced that in the time frame that is not at all going to be very long, I'm convinced that it's going to be something maximum 2 years or maybe even less. We're going to see other jurisdictions around the world, including the US, who are going to start putting frameworks in place which are not going to be very much dissimilar to ours, on the contrary. And through the standardization work, I agree with Alex, which is absolutely key. And I also invite and encourage companies to make themselves part of that process because they have a stake in it. And that will then also be representing an advantage because those standards and working against those standards would be a competitive edge anywhere else in any other market around the world. And then those other markets will I'm convinced of that follows.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking your time, Dragoș, on your very busy schedule. And we'll let you go, and thank you for your participation in this panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alex, I'll hand it over to you to share your thoughts on the competitiveness and to build on what Dragoș has shared, but also where you see possibly where the risks are from a competitiveness point of view.
Yeah, so I mean, like, you have probably heard about this AI race discussion, right? So like everyone racing to kind of get the best AI, and you know, I've said this a lot of times, but kind of what are we racing towards, right? I mean, like, so if we think about competing, if we think about competition, what are we competing for, people? I mean, like, yes, I understand, like this, we need an international competition, you know, we need healthy markets and companies, but what we see around the world, like, and look me in the eye on this, because we see a lot of conflict, right? We see challenges to democracy, to public discourse, to discussions that we're having in society. That's what we're seeing. And if kind of that's part of this landscape of competition, I think we're taking quite a healthy position on this, you know? To be honest, like, let's be honest about this. What do we want to see, you know, for ourselves, for our children, you know, for the future? I mean, that's really the question we have to ask ourselves when you talk about competition. Because, like, do I want American healthcare? Probably not, you know. Do I want American welfare? You know, if I lose my job, probably not, you know. So, I mean, like, there is a question of, like, what do we want for the future? You know, what do we want for our families? And, like, what do we want for everyday life? And that's kind of part of international competition as well. Because we can compete to have the best systems in the world to address your needs as citizens. And I think that is a worthwhile competition.
Thank you, Alex. Carolina?
No, but I was thinking, we talked before this meeting, we talked about market dynamics. So if we look at what happens with the huge players, of course they are the ones that one could say they are in favor of these regulations. I mean, they have much better resources to be compliant. So I think this won't be a game changer, even though Macron and France did a huge job to stop the regulation to include generative AI models, because that would have hampered the innovation and the possibility to compete quite a lot. That was France's takes, at least. But both with the how the biggest firms are favored or have much easier to be compliant, but at the same time, maybe we must think of reality as, like, for us, it's not like to compete directly with the biggest ones. It's more to be to have a better competitiveness situation if we really start to use AI. And at least here in Sweden, it has been problematic. We started off, Giovanni, we have discussed this a lot a few years ago and during many years by now, how important it is to create trustworthy AI. I mean, that is very good for the market, that is good for the customer relations and crucial, of course. But at the same time, maybe for us in EU, in Europe, the most valuable thing when it comes to competitiveness is that we start to use AI and not talk as much as we've done here in Sweden about all the problems and all the scary things that can happen later on the road. Technology it's always two-sided, but we need to start to use AI at a much larger extent. I mean, for you here in the room, of course, AI is something you use and know a lot about. But if you just go outside this room, we don't talk that much about AI, and we're quite afraid of AI still.
So we're in the bubble here, as it is right now. Thank you, Carolina. Cristina?
Yes, I share your thoughts in Finland also, so we have this. But there is this saying that USA innovates, China replicates, and Europe regulates. So this is something that we really should, what Mr. Tudorache said, that everybody is so keen to come to Europe and to start businesses here. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure because nobody is so interested in regulation. So regulation is not the business driver, but it can support the business. So I have, and the other ethical distress I have is that even though we make the best regulation that really works and we use AI and everything, but there are countries that are not complying with any of our regulations. And we are not knowing how they will use their AI systems or quantum computers or whatever. So this is something that we should keep in mind. That how we are going to be competitive and how are we going to reply to these countries that are not having the same value ideas than we have.
Thank you, Cristina.
Yeah.
And
I think you said it in your introductory remarks this morning, but basically if we don't trust AI or the AI solutions, we won't use them. So a lot of AI solutions fails in implementation, and I think that the focus on standards, the focus on developing high quality solutions, the focus on people first or a human-centric approach, I think that will is really driving competitiveness. Because at the end of the day, if your users aren't willing to use, the product, you won't buy the product. So, seen from my perspective, I think that the regulation in some way or another can actually drive another kind of innovation and also drive another kind of implementation.
thank you, Anne. Time flies. We have just a few minutes left, and we'll wrap it up by the panelists giving you something tangible. So you're here at the Data Innovation Summit. It's innovation with the use of data and advanced technology connected to it. And you'll be going back to your physical office or home office, and you'll get asked that, did you, what did you remember from the session? And you'll mention a couple of things, and one of the things will be this panel, hopefully. And what these panels will give you is the elevator pitch of why data innovation has to do something with the EU AI Act and vice versa, to bring with you to that question. So we'll do that. We'll do it very crisp. And then what would you want to leave with the participants? How should they answer to that when they get that question?
Yeah.
I'll start with you, Alex.
That's a difficult question to answer. No, but so what you can do is, like, there's a thing called the AI Pact, So I mean, like, a lot of you have data in some way, or data platforms, or so to make sure that these concerns are included in the AI Act, or like in the way that the AI Act is being performed. So I would say, like, there's a thing called AI Pact. Okay, remember AI Pact? Search for it. Search for the European AI Office. Okay. And look what they're doing, and make sure, like, to keep in tune with what's
They have
happening.
an information meeting on the 6th of May on the EU AI Pact. So.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's a good reference point.
That's a point of reference.
So that's a starting point. Carolina?
I'm not sure I heard your question, but if I would like to stress something. I mean, we said, as we heard, it's maybe only, if we listen to the Commission at least, only 15% that will turn out to be high-risk AI. But at the same time, as we heard from this stage earlier today also, it's a growing discussion out on in the companies and amongst employees and amongst employers, definitely, how we can encourage more use and not be afraid of AI. And something that I think could have been much more used and proactive, have been much more talked about, is the ethical guidelines of trustworthy AI. The Commission had an independent expert group a few years ago that did this guideline, and there's also it also became like a self-assessment. So, and it's still out there on the web called Alt AI, and that is how you, as a developer, can go through all stages and ask the question, have the discussion within the company when you're creating and also use later on using AI, how you can, what questions should be raised and asked and discussed. And that is something I think we should have more focus on. And that is not only for the high-risk AI, that is for all AI use, to be comfortable with using it and, yes, have it in the workplace as well.
Yes.
Thank you, Carolina.
Yeah.
Cristina, what do you want to leave?
I want to leave you with an idea that start using AI. A friend of mine, because you can now make your own AI with ChatGPT. A friend of mine, he made with ChatGPT an AI that helps the furniture industry to find the right parts to their furniture. And now he's selling this service. It's not expensive and it works, but anyway, it's income for him. So try to think what you need to do and what you want to do and what is something that you don't want to do but you must do. So there will be things that you can give to AI to do for you. You can automate. And this is my message. Start using it because it can make you rich.
That's a good point. Anne?
I think what I want to stress is, I think often people talk or think about users as something, as people that you start thinking about them when your product is finished. Then you involve them in the initial phase when you are building the use case, so you may interview people or have some workshops, and then there's this void of non-involvement in between. And I think it's really, really important that that you start thinking about how to involve future users in the entire development process. So users are also valuable in looking at data. Users are valuable in evaluating training. Users should really be part of the entire process, I think.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your final comments and remarks. To wrap up the session, I would say that this is the new frameworks that we will not only be needing to adhere to within the European Union, but as we heard from Ioan-Dragoș Tudorache, is that it will become the new normal across the world. Different variations of it, but going forward, the use of AI, the development of AI, will be set under requirements in the same as any other value chain. We have in a space that AI is being developed, it is a quite long time. 2 years is a long time frame in order to get the right awareness, to get the right information, starting to look upon your processes, to look upon the resources that are necessary, and seeing how one can gear up your organization to be developing and deploying, using and selling AI to, by design, being compliant towards both the regulations but also the upcoming standards there are. I think that one of the topics that we've touched upon today is that it's about predictability. Anyone that have been developing models and wanting to see a predictable outcome, when we see that it's stable and we see a robustness of the use of AI, that is something one can trust internally as an organization. You know that you've geared up the use of data, the use of your data pipelines, the processing of models, and its use in a stable way. In the same way, we'll be going forward is to extend that line of thinking, to also be meeting the expectations of the outside, meeting the expectation of the world and the ecosystem we are in, and also seeing what we're delivering as a part of a value chain while meeting the expectations of people around the world. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.